Hi, everybody. Doug Flora here. Welcome back for those of you that are returning. Thanks for joining the ACS Coffee Club. As you guys all know by now, this is the leading not-for-profit, nonpartisan advocacy affiliate of the ACS and is the nation's leading advocacy organization working every day to make this a state and national priority. I'm Doug Flora, Executive Medical Director of Cancer at St. Elizabeth Healthcare in Northern Kentucky. Glad to host and have a fun event for us today. I have a long-time friend as my guest today. I've known him for approximately 43 odd years. One of my longest known relationships. I think I've got is it Dan Floria? Am I pronouncing that correctly? This is fun for me. Obviously, guys, this is my brother Dan, and we have the pleasure of working together as partners, both as practicing medical oncologists, but also sort of maybe even more devoted cancer fighters outside of our clinics, because we both have developed specific interests that are not just about seeing patients. And Dan's particular goal in life is to cure cancer as a researcher. And so he has a role here at St. Elizabeth running all of our oncology research trials. And he's a principal investigator on a number of trials and well-published and well-respected at a national level, leading these ventures. So we thought we would have him on here today for a little fun, Cuomo style. I will be the younger, good-looking Cuomo for today's event, despite being 6 years older than Dan. So welcome, bud. Glad to have you on here.
Thanks, Doug. This is fun. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Well, so maybe interesting for those that know Dan or don't know how he got here, you have had a somewhat circuitous route to your life as a cancer researcher with a couple of unusual things that you did along the way. Maybe start us back at Emory, take us through how you came to med school and now the cancer doctor.
Yeah, it was a long route to get here. I didn't start my first real job till I was 37. So I initially started, I was in the neuroscience route. I was a neuroscience major at Emory, excuse me, and thought I might want to go into drug development and that type of thing. At the time I had not a lot of interest in medicine, didn't really know much about it, but through several influences, including my big brother as a mentor, we ended up changing gears a little bit and headed towards pharmacology and pharmacy as my career choice. And through that experience, I met quite a few excellent folks along the way, including some cancer doctors at University of Cincinnati, where I ended up for pharmacy school. And they had a big influence on my decision to go back and get a medical degree and eventually pursue medical oncology. So it's been a long road, but super rewarding, and ended up getting to work here in Northern Kentucky with family. It's been a really great experience.
Awesome. So yeah, so Dan's an MD PharmD, which is a very crazy thing to do, and I think has 4 board certifications to my 1. So that leads me to my next follow-up. Who is the best oncologist in our family?
It's pretty clear. I'm not going to mention any names, but
all right.
I think obviously Doug has taught me most of the things that you can't learn in a book, and for that I'll always be grateful.
That's a very delicately way of saying he knows 10 times what I know now. So I'll get on to real questions. So what we want to talk about today, Dan, is your passion for research, and especially this year around COVID, around all of the gaps in care that have been identified, the inequity in access to care, and how unique populations have been affected even more adversely than others. Maybe let's talk a little bit about cancer research in general. I think there are some misconceptions out there. So our audience is a fairly broad audience, a lot of cancer advocates, anti-cancer advocates, a lot of folks who are involved in prevention, screening, education across the state, especially. Maybe can you address some of the misconceptions? I know we deal with this in the room a lot, the guinea pig thing, and why cancer trials should not be the court of last resort, but maybe the first resort.
Yeah, no, these are really great points, Doug. And if you look at cancer research in general, it's very, very few cancer patients even have awareness of what clinical trials are. There's so many barriers to this for patients to get involved, and really that's why I'm here, is to try to raise awareness of cancer research in community hospitals like ours. But a lot of the barriers we're trying to identify at the community level, at the national level, to figure out why it is that cancer patients don't get involved. Right now, only about 3 to 5% of cancer patients ever go on a research trial. And we know that if that continues, there's no way we can make progress. This is how we find these breakthrough therapies, is by getting patients to be involved with this. So I think, if you look at the main barriers, one of it's just the fear of the unknown. You've just been diagnosed with cancer. You have no idea what this is. Changes your life, but so a doctor comes and talks with you about clinical research, it's the last thing on your mind. So as physicians, I think we are tasked to be really upfront and honest with patients and speak to them from the heart and tell them how important it is that they be involved in this from day one. And I always tell patients, the best treatment plan for any cancer patient is to be involved in a clinical trial. I could go on and on about the reasons why that would be, but at the end of the day, this is how we're going to make scientific breakthroughs that are going to change the way. And we already are. We already are making huge breakthroughs. So this is the way we're going to do it.
Yeah, well said. I think one of the differences, because Dan did the PharmD route, is I have quite a few years ahead of him as a cancer doctor. And we were just talking the other day about the advent of Herceptin. And when I was early in practice in 2005, 2006, we didn't have this incredible drug for women with breast cancer. It was always the 27-year-old mom with a tumor that went to brain. I can remember when those trials first came out and we realized that was a 53% improvement in survival. That, it was the first time I saw research as a cancer doctor changing my world, because I had this new drug to save my most desperate patients. And we now see that moving into immunotherapies where patients are spared chemo and chemo side effects. We're seeing a lot of precision medicine trials opening up with very targeted, let's hit this FGFR2 receptor with an FGFR2 blocker. And those are clinical research where that's gone from bench to bedside in 10 years. So that's why we get excited as oncologists, is the folks of you that do research on this call, the folks of you that raise money for research through the American Cancer Society and other advocacy groups, provide the resources for people like Dan to try and cure cancer. So it's a mission-driven thing. Maybe to speak to that, you mentioned the low percentage of people that are enrolled in trials. Let's talk about the paradigm in children's and how it's so different in terms of the guinea pig or the perceptions in the community adult centers versus where you seek care at Cincinnati Children's.
Yeah, no, if you look at where the most, the biggest advances have been made in cancer research in the last 50 years, it's a lot of it's come from pediatric cancer research. Well-funded, obviously there's a huge drive to cure pediatric cancers. So if you look at our own city in Cincinnati, outside of our city in Cincinnati, where they're making, major breakthroughs in leukemias and lymphomas for children, it oftentimes is because those kids have been involved early and often in clinical trials. So if you compare the numbers, say at the national level in adults, which is 3 to 5% of cancer patients on clinical trials, it's closer to 55, 60% of patients at Cincinnati Children's end up going on a clinical trial for a cancer treatment. So you can see it's clear that why those breakthroughs are being done is because there's so much involvement, there's so much opportunity. I mean, we have thousands of clinical trials that go where a patient never gets enrolled on, and the study has to close early because they just can't find participants. So if we could bump those numbers up just from 3 to 5% to 10%, or perhaps even higher, this is where we can make a major breakthrough in terms of finding the new immunotherapy or the new vaccine, whatever it's going to be. That's eventually going to, where we find a cure, which I truly believe we can. It's going to need to be, at the level of the research study. So. It's a great point. If you look at what's happening, they're the number one pediatric cancer center in the world. That's outstanding, and clearly it's because of what they're doing with research.
Yeah, I don't know how we get that to adults, but the model works, and those are the cancers that we're fixing now. So obviously, it's been a tough year for research. COVID hit, the world shut down. We couldn't enroll anybody on trial. Trials were closed across the country. And now we're starting to ramp back up and hopefully slowly rebuild what we had before. Lessons learned from COVID, though, have maybe removed some of the barriers to enrollment. Some of these things that we've learned through telehealth and remote access to trials. Can you speak to maybe some of the silver linings of what we've come through with COVID in terms of research.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been just a crazy year. If you look at the curves of number of patients enrolled across the country, it's dramatically dropped in the last year, just because it wasn't the priority, right? We were trying to get new studies started up for COVID research, which has been great. That's been a lot of breakthroughs that way, but cancer research kind of fell into the background. So you mentioned the silver linings. I think that's one of the key things about this whole about the pandemic is that we've learned so much about research and how things are gonna change dramatically because of this event. We are now understanding that we can make things happen quickly without all the red tape, without having to go through all the regulatory burden. We can actually get research done on a much faster timeline. So we hope that translates from COVID to cancer research, and it's already starting to do that. So there are companies popping up left and right where you can enroll in a clinical trial now. You can live in rural Minnesota or North Dakota and have a cancer doctor who's in Chicago or New York who's screening you for a clinical trial through an online method. So I've been contacted several times already in the last few months about, will you be a principal investigator online? So telemedicine is here. It's exciting. It's gonna, I think, revolutionize the way that we're treating patients, and it may help us get over the hump of that clinical trial enrollment problem. So yeah, I think that's been a big thing. Leveraging technology. These are the types of things we're going to need if we want to make any substantial change. And I think, looking at our own hospital system, while we did shut down trials for a little while, we are back, and we're already adding technology left and right to make it easier for patients to get involved.
Yeah, seems like you have a big axe to grind against North Dakota and Minnesota. I don't know what that's all about, but
I honestly don't know where those states came from, but they seem rural, I guess, to me, but probably not. I don't know. I could say Appalachia as well. So.
It's fair to say we probably don't have a lot of participants from those states in our chat room right now, but if you do, please weigh in. I'm sure they're nice places. What about some of the stuff that we've seen? Maybe I alluded to this earlier, but a little bit more detail. We do a terrible job as clinicians and as clinical trialists enrolling people who don't look like us and who don't have our lives. And can you maybe address some of the additional barriers or inequities that we're really trying to address at a system level here at St. Elizabeth as one of our primary goals of our quality team, but also nationally? It's the ASCO president's #1 mission for her this year is to make sure that everyone has equal access. Everyone has equal access to care. I think that's a big thing for the American Cancer Society as well. And clinical trials are on the forefront there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point, and we're certainly looking at this at the local level and regional level. But at the end of the day, the majority of patients that go on these trials are very, very homogenous. We have a group of healthy volunteers that don't adequately represent the, what the average citizen in the United States looks like, or even from a health perspective. So there's a big push now towards getting patients on studies to provide real world experience. We're not just looking for the healthy, 25 to 55 white male, which is traditionally what research has been over the last, couple decades. So there's a big push to get into communities of color, of different socioeconomic demographics, because honestly, these are the patients we see in the clinic. And so there's just like we talked about barriers to research, across the country. This is even a bigger problem because there's a lot of misconceptions among certain groups that may be disadvantaged. And so one of our pushes is going to be how to get education out into the community, into the real world, to tell folks this is really something that you can get involved in. It's safe. It's the best care that you can receive. And so we need a coordinated effort from everyone, really, to make it clear that this thing, if we work together, we can really make a big difference. And you see this with the COVID vaccine. The hesitancy to get the vaccine is seen it hits hardest in communities that are in you know, in, a, in the disadvantaged socioeconomic demographics. So this is a huge problem. We are trying to address it, and hopefully, you know, through programs, you know, like we have a program called NCORP, which is at the NCI level, is focusing on these target populations. So you know, we're getting involved with this at St. Elizabeth and at the local level, and it just needs to continue.
Yep. And I think probably unspoken is that there's a lack of trust. You know, a lot of communities of color, a lot of language barriers, a lot of transportation barriers. Everything that we did as a research community in the early 20th century with the Tuskegee syphilis incidents, and you know, we've come a long way, but there are entire communities that don't trust that clinical research is for the greater good. We have to really work to get that, and part of that, I think, is working on our own teams. For those of you that are in hiring agency positions where you're the hirer, we need people to look like these communities, who can speak culturally with sensitivity to these communities, to understand some of the concerns. And unfortunately, folks like Dan and myself mean well, but we don't have the same life experience that some of these folks do. And so to bridge that gap, we need to have a community of cancer fighters that look like everybody instead of the middle-aged white guys. So sorry, you're middle-aged now. Let's talk a little bit about some fun stuff. You guys have had some big wins despite COVID. We have a pretty dedicated staff here, and I love your team, and I love what you guys are assembling, the leaders on the administrative side with Barbara Logan and Gina. Obviously, you're pulling together a core of people who share your passion for cancer. Talk about how you guys continued to do research when no one was allowed to research, because I think you guys had a banner year despite the fact that it wasn't really clinical trials on cancer patients.
Sure. So yeah, we had to adapt and be flexible because the NCI and a lot of the cancer trials literally shut down when COVID hit. So we had to pivot pretty quickly and figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to have our staff be involved? A lot of them were working from home during the pandemic, but you know, we were lucky enough to reach out through social media on several major registry database trials, and we got involved early. And one of the particular studies we got involved with was called CCC19, which is a group of over 100 cancer centers across the United States, which is studying the unique vulnerability of cancer patients to COVID. And we have been, I think we've enrolled at this day almost over 150 patients on this registry trial, which is one of the higher involved sites. But now it's up to probably 10,000 patients across the country who have cancer, who have been impacted by COVID. And we've learned so much about this unique population. And now we're moving into the next level, which is how does the vaccine work in these folks? Does it protect them? And this is going to be one of the biggest questions that we need to learn. We now have a highly effective vaccine for the average person who has a good immune system, but for cancer patients, it doesn't work. So we just applied for a $400,000 grant here at St. Elizabeth to study this exact question. And hopefully that award comes our way so that we can continue to make these types of big, breakthrough sorts of, we learn a lot about this particular population through these studies. So
this resulted in a publication for you and Barbara Logan in the Lancet, and then more recently in Annals of Oncology. I heard you got interviewed by the local news on this one yesterday.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, the whole goal, though, honestly, is to get the word out to as many people as possible that, even if you are not on a cancer trial, you can still be involved as a cancer patient by getting involved at the community level as a patient advocate. I'm sure we may have some patient advocates on the line, or maybe, we should. And if we can get patients to be more, interactive with their physicians and their providers to learn about this stuff, they can play a big role here. And so, I put a shout out, a big thanks to all those patients that had to go through this, but they're, what we've learned from them is extremely valuable. And just, Doug, you and I within the clinic realize just how important it was that these patients were studied because of the vulnerability of them with, compromised immune systems. So it's been a big win for us to be involved with something like this. I've learned a ton. We've gained collaborations with NCI cancer centers. We've had collaborations locally with the University of Cincinnati with Dr. Trisha Draper, who's been very involved with this as well. So it's really pushed our whole program forward. And I hope that we can continue just to get these big wins as we're going along when it comes to cancer research collaborations.
Yep. I should note for those of you who are listening, please type your questions in the chat. I'm watching the chat room, and as questions roll in, I'll funnel those to Dan. Maybe if you can, let's put a more personal face to this, because obviously we have a wide audience here, and I think everybody agrees with the concept, right? Curing cancer is good. We know the only way we're going to do that is enrolling patients on trials. That's actually how you find the drugs. Can you talk about a unique situation? Maybe pick a patient from your own lexicon of folks that you think their journey was affected by the fact that they got something they would not have had access to otherwise.
Oh, gosh, I could go through so many cases, and I think the ones that really stick out in my mind are when I very first started as an oncologist. You know, back in 2013, 2014, we were involved at the national level with a research group where we were enrolling patients on clinical trials frequently to the new thing at the time, which was immunotherapy. That was just emerging as a major breakthrough for lung cancer, melanoma, and now a bunch of other cancers. But so I have patients that I was seeing in the first 6 months of being an oncologist who were enrolled on those clinical trials, stage 4 metastatic advanced lung cancer, who I still am seeing today. You know, I can give numerous examples of the patients they were enrolled in the clinical trials with immunotherapy. Either they're still on immunotherapy, you know, over the last 7 years with metastatic disease, or they've been able to come off the drugs because essentially they're cured. So I think people may not realize that we are actually curing patients with stage 4 cancers that had life expectancies of less than 6 months. And, you know, Doug, you could probably give, you know, particular examples in your clinic as well. So this is what gives us hope, right? This is the thing that we all hope for, is that, you know, for our family members or our neighbors, that we find these types of breakthrough therapies. And now that we're seeing it, we really need to get the patients on these new breakthrough medicines. So that was really the thing. You know, those are the patients that stick out to me. That, you know, the guy I have who was a melanoma patient with brain metastasis, you know, a truck driver, you know, who basically was on, you know, had just a few weeks to months to live. I still see him now only every 3 months, you know, almost 7 years out with metastatic melanoma. You know, you look at, you know, numerous examples. Jimmy Carter is a pretty good example within the, you know, at the national level, of somebody who's, you know, just been a huge advocate for melanoma research and immunotherapy research, you know, still working in his 90s on immunotherapy for metastatic melanoma. So yeah, I could go on and on. It's just, you know, this is what gets me excited. This is the stuff that I'm passionate about. So I hope that gets communicated at the local level here, that we can really start to make a big difference at getting these patients involved.
Dan, sorry, all that was on mute. Can you just redo that? No, you're right. And I can tell you, I remember my specific moment where the light went on. It was actually a patient named Dan, and he was an older guy, but kind of reminded me of who I thought I might be when I'm older. You know how you get attached to those people who remind you of yourself a little bit in the room. And I was out of drugs. He had stage 4 lung cancer to brain. Actually, he hadn't gone to brain yet. He got it later, but I sent him to see Dr. Waterhouse in our Blue Ash office because we didn't have that trial there. And it was the original nivolumab trial for lung cancer. And guys, this guy literally was 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks from passing away. And 3.5 years later, Dr. Waterhouse, who's a friend of mine, sent me a picture of this guy canoeing on vacation. And it just hit me like, wow, I could not have kept this guy alive. That drug did that. And I have another one, a young kid, a 23-year-old kid with esophageal cancer, was in a wheelchair, oxygen, out of drugs, like 6-line chemotherapy for esophageal cancer at 23. Who knows how that happens? And I sent him to Memorial Sloan Kettering. He and his wife actually moved to New York for care to get another immunotherapy drug on clinical trial. And that was 6 years ago. He is in complete remission still. So it's crazy. Yeah. So this is guys, for those of you that don't see this on your daily job, if you're raising money for cancer research, if you are advocating for patients to enroll in trials, if you're in a place where you can influence legislators, this is where we make a difference, because this is not just buying an extra 6 weeks of life for a patient with pancreas cancer, which is worthy, but these are major steps that we're making now. We've unraveled the genome a little bit. We're learning to harness T cells in people's own systems, and the drugs that Dan and I are allowed to use now are actually delivering hope, which is the whole goal, right? So Christy is in the chat room. She's added a link for fightcancer.org. So this is a great place for you guys to understand how these processes work and how to increase funding for cancer research. So maybe let's talk a little bit about your own personal goals. So it's probably unrealistic even for you to cure all cancers. What would you like to see future state? 10 years from now, what does this place look like? What is your research team doing to enhance this fight?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of big, hairy, audacious goals for cancer research here at St. Elizabeth, but also at the local and regional level. I think the big things I'd like to see is collaboration. If we can get the cancer centers to work together, as we showed what we could do with the CCC19 consortium. What if we did that at the local level and had all 6, 7 hospitals working together towards a cure instead of competing? So if there was one thing that I could really, encourage the local business community and the local hospital administrators, is this is one thing we do not want to compete on, right? We have to collaborate. That's the only way we're going to get patients on. You can't have every study, at your hospital. So if the best study is, for breast cancer patients at St. Elizabeth, the University of Cincinnati team needs to refer those patients here to get on the best trial. And we need to send our head and neck cancer phase 1 patients to the University of Cincinnati. So I think the big thing, my dream, and it's what I've been trying to do over the last few years, is to get the hospitals to work together. And when we can do that, we'll achieve so much more. So that would be one of my big goals. I think leveraging technology, and this is it's going to trickle down to the patient. So imagine if you're a cancer patient and perhaps you have an app on your phone, you could click the type of cancer that you've just been diagnosed with, and it runs you through an algorithm or a technology is telling you where the best place to get your cancer treatment, and has at your fingertips the best clinical trials. So if we can learn how to leverage technology to have patients be able to easily understand this information, that would also be a huge breakthrough. We're working on that right now with phone apps and that type of thing. Just getting the clinical trial awareness out there to the community is a huge goal of mine. And then ultimately, here at St. Elizabeth, as well as with our collaborations, we hope to build an environment where we can be studying the latest breakthrough technologies right here, rather than sending them away to other cancer centers, right? So 80% of cancer patients are seen in community hospitals like ours, and we can't always send patients to, Sloan Kettering in New York or MD Anderson in Texas. So we have to be able to bring, novel, innovative, best technologies and best science to Northern Kentucky, rather than having to continue to send patients away. Because we know when patients are treated close to home and close to their families, the outcomes are much better.
Yeah, well said. And I do think some of that's happening across the state. We at St. Elizabeth are members of the Marquis Cancer Center Affiliate Research Network, which I think is probably up to 14, 15, 16 places by now, trying to build some of those bridges for the folks in the Commonwealth. So those of you that are dialed in from Louisville or Lexington, we're trying to build this, I think, as a community of cancer researchers as well. From a travel standpoint, obviously patients with cancer really struggle to travel. And so when Dan mentioned earlier that, fairly well off 55-year-old white male, remember, if you look at the outcomes at an MD Anderson clinical trial, those are the best of the best patients, because by definition, they were educated. By definition, they had the means to travel. By definition, they were well enough to get on a plane and go hundreds of miles away or thousands of miles away to find the clinical trial that they were interested in. That doesn't represent the people that Dan and I see in our clinics. Many of our patients are barely or below high school graduation level education and health literacy. Many of them don't drive. Many of them are tied to oxygen canisters and wheelchairs, and they're just not able to travel. So those of us that work in Kentucky, which, as you guys know, is ground zero, we have to do better. We have to bring this stuff to our patients in our state and our regions. And part of that is that collegial approach, where I think the doctors get along very well. I know you're great friends with the people that run the research programs at University of Cincinnati. We're very close with the folks at UK, and some bridges are being built down in Louisville as well right now. So I think that you're right on the right path there, that we have to work together. So we have some other folks on the list. I recognize a lot of these names and regulars. There's some pharma people on here, and so some of these guys are on the sales side. Some of them are on the MSL side. Maybe speak to the role of industry in research and how this affects what you're able to do at your daily job.
Yes, I mean, this is a huge piece of it. Is, again, it comes with that collaboration that we talk about, but things have changed just since I started in research over the last 5 years. We've seen a pretty big shift towards better collaborations with pharma, and I think now we're realizing just how important it is that we start to build relationships. And I think that the sponsors are starting to understand that community centers like ours are going to have a lot to offer. So over the last couple of years, I've actually got to interact with a lot of really bright scientists who are working at the sponsor level, who are helping us to get these trials at St. Elizabeth and to bring them to the forefront. So I encourage the folks who are in the pharma world to reach out from the research perspective as the main link between your cancer center and the sponsor. And we will continue to build those relationships. And a lot of the novel therapeutics are coming from from pharma, and we have to break down some of the barriers that the sponsors are also putting up there. They make it sometimes, to be honest with you, challenging to get through all the regulatory burden. And so if we could work together to come up with a protocol that makes more sense for our patients in Kentucky, that's what we need to do. So if I can help, design a better trial using real world patients rather than, sometimes what the sponsors are putting out there, I think that would be helpful. So, and I think those relationships are happening every day. I mean, I meet with MSLs and other folks from pharma, and we really do have some good relationships. We just need to continue to expand that.
Yeah, I've seen a big change there. And for the pharmaceutical reps, they've gotten a bad rap, obviously, because there were lots of things that were done 10, 15, 20 years ago that may be questioned ethically in terms of input and access. Say now, I have a different hat that I wear. And Dan, I don't know if you even know about this, but so I chair a committee for the Association of Community Cancer Centers, and I'm that committee is liaisoning, something like that, with pharma and industry sponsors, and they've been great. And these are enormous grants being given by companies that are interested in getting the word out. It helps sell drugs, I'm sure, but also, an $800,000 gift from a company that has that sort of resources to do a program nationally to study how do we manage immuno-oncology toxicities that we then spread out to the 28,000 members of ACCC. That's a way to kind of bridge that gap where it's not feeling so salesy, but you're getting important information out about, you need to check this mutation so that you know that you might use this drug that's available. So that's good. So I think that as time closes here, me and probably Dan is more exhausted by my enthusiasm than most, because I'm a very passionate person, but I'm always trying to see the glass as half full. And I've seen the way that you're approaching this, and maybe speak to hope and why this drives your daily life. You are the busiest person I know, a bunch of young kids, a wife who's a physician. Dan is one of our busier doctors and has -2 hours a day every day. Somehow you still find time to devote yourself to this. Tell us about why hope is a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm getting a little choked up here, but I think it goes back towards, my own experiences with cancer in our family. And that's my drive, is to give back and try to, make that impact and make sure that every young mom or anybody that's been involved with cancer, and we all have, every one of us has been, impacted by this disease, including my own brother. So that's what drives me every day, is to get up, and keep thinking about how we're going to make a big difference for patients around our community. So yeah, that's what gets me, up every day. And I'm still as passionate about it as I was 5 years ago. I think, in fact, more so than I was when I started. And so, I hope that everybody gets the idea that we really can make a big difference here in our community if you get involved, and don't just, listen to this and say, oh, that was great. Maybe if you could step it up to the next level, anyone that's on this, hearing this message, just get out there and do some things, get involved, and you can certainly reach out to Doug or I and see how you can make a difference.
Yeah, Dan hasn't seen many of these. I don't know if he's ever seen one of these, but that's usually how I close, Dan. I couldn't say it better. These guys on this call, every one of you has the capacity to do something. And I don't care if it's your kid raising money for their charitable giving key club event at their high school and picking a charity that affects these patients' lives. But there's a number of people on here who I know are already doing great things. I guess Dan and I are asking for help in our fight, as we still have a lot of hope for our patients. And we're seeing life-changing benefits already. We're seeing patients who were dead in 3 months now living 7 years, and the number of Christmases and conversations and soccer games and stuff that they can attend are deeply affecting. And so I congratulate you, Dan, for your success. I love having you on here. I think there can be no question for anybody in the audience who the best oncologist in our family. So thank you for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next month. More enticing topics, and we thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks, guys.